Hi, I'm John Shepley from Emory Knoll Farms, and welcome to our presentation on building and operating a sustainable small business. When Ed Snodgrass and I started Emory Knoll Farms several years ago, we had the intention of operating the business as sustainably as we could. Our motivations were involved with social responsibility, environmental and ecological responsibility, as well as our desire to run a successful business. As we went through the process of both learning and beginning to implement some sustainability functions in our business, we learned that those three principles are what's commonly called the triple bottom line: social, environmental, and financial responsibility. This presentation will present our motivations for wanting to become a sustainable business in the first place, also the first steps that we took, and then a more process-oriented view as we developed our sustainability principles at Emory Knoll Farms. Hope you enjoy the presentation, and I'll come back at the end and we'll talk about next steps. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's begin our presentation about sustainability at a small business. Our case study here will be my business, Emory Knoll Farms. I'm John Shepley. Along with Ed Snodgrass, I'm one of the two owners of Emory Knoll Farms, located in Street, Maryland. First, an introduction of our farm. We're located on a former dairy farm of about 145 acres in Harford County, Maryland. Ed started the wholesale business in 2000, and we incorporated in 2004. We were, and as far as we know, we still are, the only nursery that specializes solely on providing plants for extensive green roofs. That means we grow mostly sedums and other supplements, and we use less than 5 acres of the 145 acres on our farm for that. We have about 20,000 square feet of greenhouses, and the remainder of the land is used for residences, reforestation, habitat restoration, and the entire property is in agricultural preservation, which means that it can't be developed into housing developments. We've been fortunate. We provided plants sufficient for over 100 acres of green roofs since we started our operation, and we are a sustainable business. We've endeavored to operate in that way from the very beginning, and that's really what this presentation is about. For this presentation, here's our agenda. First, what is sustainability, and why would a business owner opt to try to make his business be sustainable? Does it really make sense? And then we'll talk as a case study about Emory Knoll Farms' own sustainability goals, and then how to implement those goals in 2 levels. The first steps, the easy, low-hanging fruit, the small things that you can do that can create savings without a big investment, and then use those savings to move towards the longer-term solutions, which is establishing a triple bottom line accountability system that accounts for people, the planet or the environment, and prosperity. There are many, many definitions of the term sustainability. I know many people that have their own way of looking at it, and they feel very strongly about that. In order to keep it simple, I'm presenting the definition that was provided by the President's Council on Sustainable Development, which is meeting the needs of present generations without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Why did we choose to be a sustainable company? Or why should any company choose it? Well, first of all, the way that businesses grow, especially in the long run, is through innovation and leadership. Sustainability is absolutely the way of the future, as we'll explain in a moment. So that's a pretty good reason. But a better reason is becoming sustainable has absolute positive impacts on the bottom line. Just think about it. Consuming less energy, for example, means you reduce your energy costs. That seems like a good thing. I mean, that's what most businesses try to do. Certainly, employee productivity goes up if the employees are more well compensated and working in a great environment. And also, the human and the business environments are far improved. These things tend to, I believe, make a company be a little bit recession resistant. So to think about sustainability, we have to think about our business and our natural worlds as systems that are interrelated and all work together, and all parts of those systems. Systems thinking is a way for people to understand how the world works without necessarily needing to know the detail. Our bodies are systems, and we know that all the different parts of our bodies are linked, and we don't necessarily have to be a doctor to understand that if we go out and work too hard, we're going to have achy joints and muscles. For looking at businesses and communities, there's a program called the Natural Step that was developed in Sweden by a Swedish oncologist by the name of Karl-Heinrich Robert. It's sort of a framework for thinking about sustainability and thinking about the system of how we interact with the natural world in some very fundamental ways. And I'd like to explain that a little bit further. The framework of the natural step is made up of 4 fundamental system conditions. And I'll read these to you and we'll think about them a little bit. Substances from the earth must not systematically increase in nature. Man-made substances must not increase systematically in nature. And the productivity of and diversity of nature must not be systematically destroyed. And finally, there must be a fair and equitable distribution of resources. What these 4 conditions mean is that we need to be aware of and think about and intentional about what it is we take, what it is we make, what we leave, and whether or not we're fair. Those are the fundamental ideas within these conditions. By honoring those conditions, we can move towards a sustainable world. Now, the concepts of the natural step can be represented in the form of a double-ended funnel, as well as how we interact with them. This is kind of what it looks like. There are 2 slopes on the input side of the funnel. The first one represents society's increasing demand for resources as society grows. The other sloping edge represents diminishing resource availability. Both of these are pretty fundamental in our world. Now, a non-sustainable or a reactive business basically operates by doing what they want to do as if there were no limits on resources until they hit those limits. We see that all the time. Oil industry, all kinds of extractive industries, it's exactly what they do. One of the goals of a sustainable business is to avoid those walls, but rather to work well within the boundaries of our demand and our availability of resources to get through the narrow part of the funnel, which defines a path to the point where we can actually begin to restore our Earth's resources rather than be depleting them at all. So we do that by going to basically a zero consumption point. The key thing about this funnel shape is we get to define how we interact with those limits. We define what we purchase, produce, waste, and send to the landfill. And we can demand of our own business processes that we avoid hitting the wall. So to kind of summarize the natural step approach, in a sustainable organization, we use renewables. And we use products that are recycled and can be recycled. We avoid toxic materials. We protect and restore all the Earth's natural surfaces, and we have to be intentional about doing that. We can't be passive about doing that. And most importantly, for the people, we have to be efficient and we have to be equitable. Here's a little chart that basically does a compare and contrast between non-sustainable versus sustainable organizations or communities for that matter. Non-sustainable are extractive, they're linear, they're fossil fuel driven. Sustainable enterprises are renewable, they recognize the cyclical nature of our universe, and they're solar driven. All the energy that we have on Earth, all the coal, all the oil, all the natural gas originally came from solar power. So we need to remember that. Likewise, wasteful, harmful, are non-sustainable practices, but nature leaves no waste. Nature, the substances produced in nature are generally benign. So these are just some of the comparisons. So moving on to taking those concepts of the natural step and putting them into practice. The first step has to be setting some goals and creating a plan. Again, I've used the word intentional a number of times. The notion here is that, well, I think one of my heroes actually said it best. If you got to be really careful if you don't know where you're going, because you might not get there. And I think that's a great sentiment. So let's discuss the goals for sustainability and energy that we set here at Emory Knoll Farms. These are examples, and the priorities that were applied to them were applied because of the nature of our business and the way we wanted to approach the problem. Any other business can certainly have a completely different set of goals that are every bit as valid, so just look at these as examples. The first example is to maintain the functionality of our operation. We wanted to be able to maintain the operation and grow the operation as demand grows without that becoming a stressful thing and not trying to drive the business beyond the level that the market would support either. One thing that Ed and I decided very early on is that we absolutely was critical that we never compromise the quality of our product or our service as we grow. And also, we didn't want to be control freaks either. We wanted to have an effective staff that knew what they were doing, and it would help us minimize the amount of effort we put into management. We also, for ecological reasons, want to minimize our footprint. We had made decisions to offset our growth by having a part of what we do every year work towards restoring habitat on this dairy farm. And obviously we do everything we can to avoid harmful substances. We do occasionally have to use pesticides, but only when they're required by law. For example, if we ship to the West Coast. And we've even found ways to avoid that while staying within the law. An important factor for me personally was to minimize the consumption of energy and to move towards alternative and renewable energy in the nursery. We also have as a longer term goal to think, can we produce energy on the farm with solar panels, for example, and actually sell that energy as a source of revenue for the business. Continuing our goals, on the financial front, we had made a decision never to use debt for the purpose of growing our business. We really wanted to avoid the pratfalls that a lot of startup businesses get into, where the debt service becomes too big, and then if you get a little bit behind or if you have a bad year, you're using more debt just to maintain the operation, and it's a really vicious circle that we wanted to avoid. By avoiding debt, we can manage our cash flow better, and we can find ways to use savings rather from the things that we implement to help pay for future improvements, and those apply to both sustainable initiatives but also business initiatives as well. And finally, it was a goal for us to have an accountability system. Again, to paraphrase Yogi Berra, if you don't know where you're going, you might end up somewhere else. I know a lot of people have taken credit for that quote. I'm not sure who originally said it, but anyway, a full sustainability accounting system would account for our energy consumption and savings, our environmental impacts, our social impacts, as well as the basic financial accounting features. So where we're going to go now is to, again, take those goals and how do we implement them. Well, the very simplest rule when it comes to sustainability is the 3 steps: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Reduce your consumption, reduce your intake, reduce your effort. Reuse things. Reuse is far better than recycle. If we can reuse cardboard boxes, that's better than shipping those boxes to a recycling plant to have them made into new boxes. And then finally, recycle. Here's an example of our use of recycling, or reuse I should say. This attractive planter with sempervivum growing in it is a recycled household product of some kind. So with reduce, reuse, and recycle in mind, any business, and we started off exactly this way, can start off with some baby steps. You know, you can replace your incandescent bulbs with compact fluorescent bulbs. You can set up a recycling center in your office or in your workplace. We recycle paper and cardboard and bottles and cans primarily, but you know, we recycle everything that is recyclable. We save things. We save every old thing that we have laying around. If you're organized, it's not too bad, but it can make the place look like a junkyard. Lumber. If we tear something down, we'll save the lumber to reuse it. And then the things that I think we all can do. Energy Star appliances. Set your computers in the office for the highest energy savings. Have them go dormant. Have the screens and disk drives shut off if they've not been used for a while. And create a culture. You know, those are all these things cost virtually nothing. You know, you got to buy light bulbs periodically anyway. You need appliances. Just be energy aware. You already have computers. You can go in and change the settings. There's no real expense represented on this page, but there is a savings. The compact fluorescent bulbs use 25% of the electricity of incandescence. Setting the energy savers on your computers can probably save 70% of the energy that the computer uses. So you can impact your electric bill in a day by doing these things. Here's a little visual for you. Compact fluorescent bulbs. This is Ed's green window shade growing in front of the window of his house, of his office at the farm. And then reuse. This, again, another traditional farm implement. I think that's a manure spreader. The earlier implement had a different function relative to that stuff that we made into an attractive planter. So this is actual data from Emory Knoll Farms starting in 2004 of we were able to impact our electricity bill. So the 2 graphs on this chart, the red graph is our electricity consumption in kilowatt hours per year. And you could see we in around 2005, when we really started implementing things like this, our electricity bill dropped dramatically. Meanwhile, our sales were going up, so they were kind of going in the right direction. We were using less energy as we sold more product. Now, beginning in 2008, our staffing went up. We kind of made some quantum leaps in the business, and our energy went up accordingly. However, we're still working on it, and you can see that we're still working to impact it in the right direction. This is a good example of an accountability system. By doing nothing more than entering my monthly electric bill into a spreadsheet, I can see, both graphically and in the numbers, exactly how we're doing and how we're trending. So when you do the baby steps, you can use the savings that you realize to help fund the bigger steps. And I broke this into several areas. First, the materials and supplies that we use. One of the very first conversations Ed and I had was to agree not to use a paper catalog. It saves tons of paper and thousands of dollars in annual postage. So there's savings there. We did have to turn around and invest that money in a website that would provide the kind of catalog we wanted to have. But again, we get recurring savings now that all that stuff is built. We purchase materials in quantity. Save a lot of money by buying truckloads of potting mix or planting trays rather than partial truckloads. We're fortunate that we have the space to store it. We plan our production to maximize year-round performance and take advantage of the seasons rather than have the seasons hurt us. As a nursery, that's important, but also as a sustainable business, we want to keep our staff working year-round. This all just takes awareness and careful planning and, just a few phone calls. Just having people remember that when they order something, find out where the next price break is above the level you want to order and see if you can afford to order enough to realize that savings. It's hard to believe, but that is what sustainability is in many, many ways. It's just thinking about the impacts of a decision. Looking at the energy front, we've done a number of initiatives. The nursery industry is an energy-intensive business. One thing is to consider the embodied energy of things we buy. What that means is, is the transportation cost significant? Can you get it from a closer source than where it's actually coming from? Did it take a lot of energy to produce it, and are there alternatives that it might take less production of energy? Even better is, do you need to buy the things? Do you have current solutions that might do the job well enough? Can you update equipment or upgrade your computers or whatever rather than just buying a new one? We found great savings, by exploring rental places that we can get equipment that we only use occasionally. So those are a couple of the things we can do. And then just consider, what is the origin of your products? Are they petroleum derived? Do they use renewable resources? Are there alternatives? Are you using styrofoam cups in your break room? That's really bad. Are you using paper cups? That's better. But, hey, go down to Goodwill or the Salvation Army and buy some glasses and coffee mugs for a couple dollars. They'll last a long time. They're used. You're reusing somebody else's waste flow. That's the kind of consideration that these things deserve. The waste stream, again, these are examples from our business. Our plants come in a tray called a liner, and we use bottom trays that make it easier to handle them. Well, the bottom trays are expensive, and we found out that there are neighboring nurseries that bundle theirs up for recycling. Well, rather than let them do that and then us going and buying the same material, we just go and those nurseries will give us some of the bottom trays. Again, reuse being far more efficient than recycling in that case. We would love to return the plastic materials after delivery. It's difficult to do that, but we're always open when a customer wants to do that and are happy to take the things back. We also recycle our greenhouse plastic and even our personal waste. All of our stuff that we get for lunches, if we bring a bottled water or whatever, obviously gets recycled. And we use only composting toilets at Emory Knoll Farms, and that goes out into the compost heap. And I mentioned earlier, the triple bottom line view of these things is to consider the impacts on three fundamental aspects of our business, of every decision we make. The people. When we make decisions relative to people, we make them in due consideration of our role in our society, our community, and the people that are already working with us. That's our employees, our partners, everybody that's engaged with us, our families even. Planet, every decision has an impact on where did the material come from, where is it going to go when we're done with it, how are we going to use it, how can we use less of it. And then the financial part, prosperity. In order to be a sustainable business, we have to stay in business. I think I've begun to demonstrate that the investment has very real payback, the very real return, but you have to make the investment in the first place. So being sustainable actually contributes to our prosperity as well. It's not a vicious circle anymore. It's a really great cycle. We save some money, we invest that savings in other things we can do that let us save even more money. On the people, again, these are examples of what we do at Emory Knoll Farms, and they might be different for a different kind of business. We hire local whenever possible. Occasionally we'll take student interns that might come from any part of the country, but if it becomes a permanent job, we're usually looking to provide jobs within our own community. We pay a living wage. That means that our baseline pay is significantly above the state and federal mandated living wage. We provide health care benefits that the company provides 75% of the payment for, and the employees pay 25%. We have a 401k, retirement, and a profit sharing plan. We incentivize among our employees through a bonus system safety, environmentalism, innovation, and we incentivize our employees to stay with us for a long time so that they're more effective and efficient at doing their jobs. And we provide educational opportunities for our employees. Some of our younger folks that were not college bound will get into horticultural courses or special training programs, for instance, up at Longwood Gardens. We buy local. We support a local living economy and support locally owned businesses. And we invest our investment mechanisms, for example, on our 401k, all of our mutual funds are socially responsible. And this is a picture, this is I think the 2 years ago summer portrait. We don't have one from this year of our people, including our mascot Huckleberry there on the right with Shelley. On the planet, our environmental initiatives affect our daily activities and operations. Everything we do, again, the use of fertilizer, the use of herbicides and pesticides, we think about in everything we do. The materials and supplies that we buy, and the capital improvements. On the capital improvements front, we've invested heavily in renewable energy. Again, I mentioned earlier that we're an energy-intensive business. The first thing we did for electricity is Ed had, even before we started the nursery, had installed a solar roof with 1.2 kilowatts of electric photovoltaic panels. In the summer, that array actually provides about 75% of our electricity use, and we got a grant to do that, which paid about 30% of the cost. On the part of the electricity that we consume, we are using a local wind power company and purchasing wind power credits for 100% of our remaining consumption. And there's our solar roof on top of the barn with our green roof there. We also invested in a solar irrigation system. We have 2 wells on the farm that we use for the nursery. The first one, which has been in service for more than 10 years, produces just a small amount of water, but it produces it all day long, and we basically store that water in tanks, and then we use it to irrigate the 3 greenhouses around our barn. The second solar well we installed in 2007. It's a bit more powerful. It's for our back greenhouses. We have 9,000 gallons of water storage, which is sufficient for us to irrigate about 2 acres of outdoor and greenhouse space. And that second system is completely off the grid. There's no connection to the grid at all. And here's a picture of one of our solar wells. This is the older one. And there's the little solar array. You can see it's very small and it's not very expensive, and it suits our needs perfectly. The other way that Emory Knoll Farms is particularly intensive is the greenhouse heat. And we addressed that issue beginning in 2006 when we acquired a 350,000 BTU boiler. Interestingly, we got this boiler from another company that was relocating, and they wanted to have a green roof on one of their buildings there. So we bartered plants for it, and they got a good deal and we got a good deal. We modified the boiler to burn used French fry oil, used cooking oil that comes from local restaurants, and we use a local business that collects that and delivers it to us. And we augment the boiler with 5 solar hot water panels on the roof of the nursery. And here's a picture of our boiler. It's made by Clean Burn, which is also a local business. It's very, very efficient. It's very, very clean. Not only does it burn the veggie oil, but as a backup we can burn used motor oil and as well as home heating oil. And it's rated and approved by the EPA for all those fuels. It's not only important that we use an alternative energy for our heat, but that we're very, very efficient in heating our greenhouses. So we use hydronic heat, and there's a lot of reasons that we thought through in great detail for that. The heat is moved from place to place with the use of very small little circulator pumps. They're a 20th of a horsepower. They draw far less electricity than a 120-watt light bulb, and they're very efficient by moving heat in the form of hot water from one place to the other. We use underfloor heat or heat on our nursery benches that applies the heat directly to the root zone of the plants where it's needed the most, and we don't put a lot of energy off into the air where it's just going to escape through the walls of the greenhouse. We designed our system to be expandable. We can put, if we need the houses to be warmer, we can heat the air with unit heaters. We use and we can continue to use baseboards for our offices in the existing workspaces. And we also could add either an additional boiler or solar panels to increase our capacity if we need to do that. In this section of the presentation, I'm going to compare and contrast the costs and benefits of alternative choices, the more sustainable choice versus the less sustainable choice, in some of the choices that we've talked about so far. Paying a living wage certainly has a higher cost. The increased wages, the increased payroll taxes, the cost of the benefits we provide, listen, they are very expensive. Everybody in business knows that. But most people don't consider the benefit of having a highly trained, very invested, efficient workforce with very little turnover. Do you know what the cost of replacing a key employee because they went and found a better job is? I bet you don't, but it's significant. The alternative is to be a minimum wage employer, to kind of be meager, if you will. Well, we save money. There's a benefit. It increases our profitability, or seems to anyway, but that comes at a cost of increased employee turnover and poor training among our employees, which translates into lower efficiency and less effectiveness in them doing their work. So you have to wonder, is there really a savings by doing that, or is it just kind of hidden in other things that management has to do? On the energy front, renewable energy has a very, very high upfront cost. It's a big capital investment in renewables. The benefits include better health, lower, or in some cases like our solar irrigation, zero recurring cost, which translates into greater margins. And we don't want to understate the health benefit. We live in a healthier environment because we're consuming cleaner energy at our workplace. Or we could go to fossil fuel, traditional energy. Now the interesting thing about that is the cost, well, we can't control that. The utilities control that. And what are the benefits? Really none, because you don't get a payback on that, and costs are, for certain, as they have for the last 100 years, going to go up over time. And what's the benefit of that? Your business will become more costly to operate as you go forward. Our decision to use cash rather than debt for growth. Well, the cost side of that, we may not be able to grow as quickly as we want to. If a big opportunity comes up, we may forgo that opportunity, or we may have to approach it differently in a way that means we would adopt it slower. But the benefits are, again, it eliminates a lot of risk out of any business. We don't have the cost of servicing debt, and when recessions hit, we seem to be better able to resist that. Using debt, well, first of all, there is a cost. You're going to pay interest money that's going to go to the banks. That's money out of your pocket and into somebody else's. You may run up against credit limits where you're planning on using a certain amount of credit, and if those limits change, all of a sudden your basic business model is affected. Yeah, there's a benefit. There is a higher potential for fast growth, but that comes with substantial risk. Choosing to buy locally. A lot of times when we look at this, we find local prices seem to be higher. But actually, when we look a little bit harder, we can usually find prices that are as good or better in the local markets as buying from big national companies. The benefit is immense. When you buy locally, you have an opportunity to establish a relationship with the business owner, whether it's a service or a product. When you have a relationship with them, they're going to respect and value your business, and they're going to look out for your best interests. That means improved service, improved quality of the product or service you're receiving, and if it's local, it may improve delivery time. Or you can go out and shop for the cheapest. Yeah, it might be less expensive, but probably not. But there's other expenses. If you get something that's poor, how do you resolve it? Is it easy or hard? What if you have to return something? Is that easy or hard with a multinational or a national company? So again, we see this is sort of the qualitative analysis of the business case, and we see that all the sustainability initiatives that we've implemented have had immense payback for our business. This is one of the paybacks: a healthy, happy environment, and that's what it's like at our nursery. Looking forward, just some of the things we're planning on doing. We would like to be able to increase our solar photovoltaic capacity to offset all of the electricity that we consume. We have a program in place to reestablish the native flora and fauna on the property. This property has suffered from generations of applications of herbicides and pesticides, and we have a couple of grants that we're using, as well as our own resources, to bring back native grasses and wildflowers, and to try to reintroduce native animals there as well. On the accountability front, I have this under our future things, though we've just implemented it. In 2010, just about a year ago, we became one of the first 5 benefit corporations in the United States. Maryland had passed a law allowing businesses to basically, under the protection of the law, to invest and put money into sustainability initiatives and to protect the business from outside influences that may want to prevent that. There's a famous story that Ben & Jerry's, because they didn't have a statute like this, when they sold the company, all their sustainability initiatives got basically thrown away because there was no way to protect those. That law requires Emory Knoll Farms to file an annual sustainability report, and I've included the link here. Also, about 3 months ago, we became a certified B Corporation through bcorporation.net. That is a private certification that has a very rigorous accountability system, and it ensures that we meet a certain bar for our type of business on sustainability in order to maintain that certification. Our wish list for the future: I would love to find a replacement for plastic. We use polystyrene nursery trays right now, and I put on here corn-based, but maybe it's paper-based, maybe it's some other renewable material. We'd like to find plug trays that are not made out of fossil fuels. We'd like to find plug trays that we could have decompose right in place on a roof. Find sustainably created planting media. We've already moved our sources for that material locally and made it as sustainable as we can, but we're always continuing to look at that. We also have a desire, when we're financially able to fund a local scholarship for green horticulture and invest in our community in that way. So, it's kind of the conclusion. What do you want to do?
I hope you found our presentation useful and informative. I'll be available in Emory Knoll Farms' virtual trade show booth for the entire program. Also, if you have questions, if you'd like to learn more, if you have ideas for your business that you'd like to share and talk about, you can contact me directly at Emory Knoll Farms, 410-452-5880, or you can reach me by email at jshepley@greenroofplants.com. I'll conclude the presentation with a page of resources that we found useful and are a great place to start when learning about sustainability in business. Thank you very much for attending.